Her name is Park Ji-hyun, but before she had a story to tell the world, she was just a girl from Haisun, a city pressed against the cold Yalu River. Her world was small, defined by towering portraits of the Kim dynasty, the ever-present threat of hunger. She grew up where your thoughts were not your own. A misplaced word could lead to the disappearance of your family. Life was a script, written by the state. Every citizen was an actor forced to play their part. She was taught to revere the supreme leader as a god, to believe North Korea was a paradise on earth, to believe the world outside was a hellscape of American imperialists. Yet that promised paradise felt like a prison. Her father, once a respected teacher, saw his life crumble. He taught her to think, to question, a dangerous gift where blind obedience was demanded. That seed of independent thought would grow into a defiant tree of hope. Ji-hyun's world was one of stark contrasts. From the banks of the Yalu at night you could see Changbai's distant lights. Those lights were more than electricity. They were a symbol. For Ji-hyun, whose spirit refused to be extinguished, those lights were a call to action. They whispered a promise of a life she wasn't supposed to want, a future she was determined to seize. The decision to leave one's home is never made lightly. For Ji-hyun, it was not a choice but a necessity, an act of self-preservation. The arduous march had descended upon North Korea like a biblical plague, stripping the land of its last vestiges of sustenance. The government's promises of rice and prosperity had evaporated into thin air, leaving millions to fend for themselves. People were starving. They were eating grass, tree bark, anything they could find to quiet the relentless ache in their stomachs. Even her own uncle wasted away, succumbing to the slow, agonizing death of malnutrition. The paradise she was taught to love was actively consuming its own people. Her father's health was failing. The responsibility to survive fell squarely on her young shoulders. The state that was supposed to protect them had abandoned them. The social contract was broken. Ji-hyun realized that staying in North Korea was a death sentence, delivered slowly and without ceremony. The instinct to live, the most fundamental human drive, began to overpower the years of indoctrination and fear. She knew that to have any chance at a future, for herself and for her family, she had to do the unthinkable. She had to escape. The dream of freedom was intertwined with the basic need for food. It wasn't an abstract political ideology that drove her, it was the raw, primal urge to survive. She heard whispers, hushed rumors of people who had crossed the river into China. For Ji-hyun, that simple promise was worth risking everything she had, which in the end was only her life itself. The night was moonless, a perfect cloak of darkness for the desperate. Ji-hyun and her younger brother stood at the edge of the frozen Yalu River. The air was so cold it burned their lungs with every breath. Fear was a physical presence. A cold knot tightened in her stomach, far colder than the ice beneath her feet. Every shadow seemed to hold a soldier. Every gust of wind sounded like a shouted command. North Korean border guards patrolled with orders to shoot to kill. This was the point of no return. A single misstep could be their last. A single sound could be their last. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat counting down the seconds of her old life. They moved with desperate urgency, thin shoes slipping on uneven ice. The river was a treacherous landscape of frozen peaks and hidden cracks. With each step, the ice groaned under their weight. Ji-hyun held her brother's hand, her grip a lifeline in the suffocating darkness. They were crossing a boundary between two worlds, leaving behind everything they had ever known for an uncertain future. The journey that looked short from shore felt like an eternity, a terrifying pilgrimage from oppression toward fragile, unknown hope. For 6 years, Ji-hyun lived in the shadows. She was a mother, she was a wife, she was a prisoner. She raised her son, teaching him to be cautious, to never reveal their secret. Every knock on the door, every police siren in the distance, sent a jolt of panic through her. She lived with the constant gnawing fear that her fragile existence could be shattered at any moment. The Chinese government did not recognize North Koreans as refugees. They were labeled illegal economic migrants to be arrested and repatriated. That policy condemned thousands to torture, imprisonment, and death. The day she had dreaded arrived. A neighbor reported her to the police, petty dispute or promise of a small reward. Authorities came without warning. No trial, no hearing, no chance to plead. She was a North Korean, and that was all that mattered. Her son, a small boy, was ripped from her arms. Her cries were ignored. She was handcuffed, thrown into a police vehicle. Her world collapsed again. The journey back was a descent into hell, packed into a crowded truck with other defectors treated like cargo. Imprisoned and broken, Ji-hyun was a ghost of her former self. The detention camp was designed to strip away every ounce of humanity. Prisoners were given just enough food to keep them alive, a watery soup with only a few kernels of corn. Disease was rampant, medical care was just non-existent. A festering infection developed in her leg from an injury. It quickly turned gangrenous without treatment. The pain was excruciating, a constant throbbing reminder of her hopeless situation. The guards saw her as a useless burden, decided she was no longer worth the effort. They released her, expecting her to crawl away and die quietly. This act of cold indifference was, paradoxically, her salvation. She could barely walk, her legs swollen and black. She was alone, she was penniless, she was gravely ill in a country that had already condemned her. Most people would have given up, but Park Ji-hyun was not most people. The image of her son, his tear-streaked face being torn from her arms, was burned into her mind. That memory became her reason to live. It fueled her will to survive. She began to beg, a humiliating act for a woman who once had pride and dignity. One day a man took pity on her, not a doctor but versed in traditional medicine. Using a simple, unsterilized knife, he cut into her leg to drain the infection. The pain was beyond description, but she endured it. Crude, brutal surgery, yet it saved her life. The decision to attempt a second escape was an act of breathtaking courage. Ji-hyun knew the risks were even higher this time. As a known defector, she was a marked woman. If caught again, there would be no leniency, no prison camp. The punishment would be swift and final. But the alternative, a life of fear and submission in North Korea, forever separated from her child, was simply not a life she would accept. She found a different broker who would help for a price she couldn't pay. She promised to work off the debt once she reached China, a pledge built on nothing but her word and desperation. This time the route was different, more perilous. Instead of a frozen river, she had to cross the Tumen River in the dead of summer, then a treacherous mountain range, a rugged wilderness serving as a natural barrier. She traveled with a small group of defectors. Their shared fear and hope bound them together. They moved at night, they hid during the day. Their senses stayed on high alert. Every rustle of leaves, every distant dog bark could signal discovery. The emotional toll was immense, a constant seesaw between terror and determination. The mountain journey was a grueling ordeal. For days they climbed steep paths and rocky trails. Their bodies ached, their food supplies dwindled. The terrain was unforgiving. Ji-hyun's previously injured leg throbbed with every step. At one point she collapsed, exhausted and demoralized. She felt she could not go on. She told the others to leave her behind to save themselves. But a young man refused. He had been a soldier in North Korea. He looked at her and said, "In the army we never leave a comrade behind." He hoisted her onto his back and carried her. His name was Kwang. His kindness was a turning point. Reaching China for the second time was a victory, but a fragile one. Ji-hyun was once again an illegal alien in a country that wanted her gone. The first priority was finding her son. It was a near impossible task. She had been separated from him for years. He was just one small boy in a nation of over 1 billion people. Kwang, the man who had carried her through the mountains, underground activists, missionaries. She began her search. It was a painstaking process, following faint leads and whispers, often leading to dead ends and crushing disappointment. The search was a race against time. Every day they remained in China, they risked being discovered and sent back. Kwang, who had become her partner and protector, stayed by her side. Their shared ordeal had forged a deep bond between them. He understood her pain and her relentless drive to find her child. After months of searching, they received a tip. Her son was living with his paternal grandparents in a remote village. The reunion was a moment of overwhelming emotion. Her son, now older, barely recognized her at first. But as she held him, crying his name, the memories came flooding back. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated joy, a miracle she had thought she might never see. But they were still not safe. The goal was South Korea, the democratic and prosperous nation that recognized North Koreans as its own citizens. Finally, after a journey that had spanned years and covered thousands of miles, they reached a South Korean embassy. They walked inside and declared their identity. What is it that allows a person to endure the unimaginable? For Park Ji-hyun, it was not the absence of fear, but the refusal to be ruled by it. Courage, her story teaches us, is not about being fearless, it's about being terrified and taking the next step anyway. Her bravery was not a single act of heroism, but 1,000 small acts of defiance against despair. Hope, for Ji-hyun, was not a passive wish. It was an active, powerful force. It was the memory of her son's face that fueled her will to survive a gangrenous infection. It was the dream of a life where her child would not go hungry that pushed her to cross mountains and jungles. Hope was the belief that a better world was possible, even when all evidence pointed to the contrary. Her journey also reveals the profound power of human connection. She did not make it alone. Her story is punctuated by moments of kindness from unexpected sources. The man who performed a crude surgery that saved her leg, the missionaries and activists who guided her, and most importantly, Kwang, the soldier who refused to leave her behind. In a world that seemed determined to crush her, these acts of compassion were lifelines. Today, Ji-hyun lives as a free woman. She eventually married Kwang, and together they are raising her son in the United Kingdom. She has a voice, and she uses it to speak for those who are still silenced. Her life is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It shows that no wall is too high, no river too wide, and no regime too powerful to extinguish the fundamental human desire for freedom and dignity. Her courage was the key that unlocked her own cage, and we owe it to her and to the millions she represents to listen.